Unlimited plan with 25 gigs of high-speed data, then 2G. You might miss sports, but don't play games, you'll lose. Straight Talk Wireless. No contracts, no compromise.
Savings may vary. See terms and conditions at straighttalk.com. Before we can move forward, we have to get ready to start moving again. Movement is how we express ourselves. No matter if it's on the hardwood, the track, or the highway, movement drives our potential, and it helps us build momentum for tomorrow. Movement takes us further than we ever thought possible. It's what separates us in competition, and it's what unites us when we need it most. So when you're ready to start moving forward again, we'll make sure you're ready for every mile. Goodyear, more driven.
The Home Depot makes it easier than ever to get going on your summer projects without having to go anywhere. With convenient online shopping, you can find it fast. With convenient delivery options, including free delivery, you can get it fast. Whatever you need, whenever you need it, the Home Depot delivers right to your door. Now with more ways than ever to get summer and summer projects off to a good start. Delivery options from the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
Redbox has non-stop excitement with new movies and summer blockbusters. Don't miss Becky, an action-packed thriller brought to you by Redbox Entertainment, starring Lulu Wilson, Kevin James, and Joel McHale. When a father and his teenage daughter go on a weekend retreat, they look forward to peace and relaxation. However, a group of convicts have something much more sinister in mind when their paths are crossed. Rent Becky and other new movies at Redbox. Make it a movie night and visit redbox.com for all the ways to watch.
The radio home of the 76ers.
Into the lane, reverse, windmill jam. Are you kidding me?
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ-HD, Millville, Atlantic City. This is the Sports Bash with Mike Gill on 97.3 ESPN. Now, live inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, here's Mike Gill.
Yes, it's a happy hour Friday. Josh Hennig, Hunter Brody here on 97.3 ESPN. Mike Gill has the day off. He'll be back in here on Monday. We'll get to more of your text messages this hour, 609-403-0973. But right now, joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, Michael Kaskey-Blomain, CBS Sports NBA writer, Sixers insider. As he tweeted earlier today, Sixers play their first scrimmage in Orlando 1 week from today. But the question is, and I asked it multiple times today, how serious can we take all of this Ben Simmons shooting? How seriously can we take it? We'll get into all that Sixers stuff and more with Michael Kaskey-Blomain right now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, how you doing today?
Josh, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on.
We appreciate you jumping on, so let's get right at it off the top. As I said, Ben Simmons is shooting threes in every video you turn online. Should we take it seriously?
I think we should take it probably about as serious as we've taken it before, meaning that, it's clearly a part of his game that he's trying to work on behind the scenes. I don't think that necessarily means that he's going to be comfortable doing it in games. I don't think it should, mean that we're going to see him, jacking up 5 threes a game, especially given the fact that he was coming off an injury. I think, the main thing that he did with this, the time away before they went to Orlando, I think really was mainly just getting himself, physically ready in game shape, after being sidelined for an extended period of time with that back injury. I don't think, shooting was part of it, but I don't think it was like he dedicated, extra time to working on that aspect of his game. And while, I do think it's still going to continue to develop, I don't think it's necessarily just going to happen in Orlando that he comes out and starts, knocking down a lot of threes.
Do you think the change in position will now force him to be in certain spots on the floor, which then maybe changed his mindset in saying, hey, maybe I do need to do this more?
Yeah, also I think it'll help him just be more comfortable because if you don't have the ball in your hand and you're in a catch and shoot situation, it's just a really quick instinct. You catch the ball, you're open, and you release it. And I think that maybe playing him off the ball would help him, get a little bit more comfortable taking shots as opposed to, if you have the ball in your hand, you're dribbling. It's a little bit more of a, a mental process to decide, all right, I'm going to pull up and take the shot right now, when if you're just catching it and letting it fly. So I think part of it would be that. And then, like you said, I think part of it would just be the fact that, if he's playing off ball and you already have Joel in the post, then, he's going to need to, space the floor. And I'm sure Brett and the rest of the coaching staff is going to be telling him to let it fly. So I think the combination of those two things will, lead to him, maybe attempting a little bit more than we've seen so far, but hopefully just gaining, a little bit more comfort in the action.
How does this move impact Joel Embiid? Because if Ben Simmons is playing the point forward and maybe sometimes he's in the corners, will that result in a double team? And then, the way I look at it as Giannis is someone who clearly isn't a great three-point shooter, but he is able to make it. Teams still don't respect him at all. So even if Ben is camped out in the corner and Joel Embiid gets doubled and somehow maybe he finds him, even though passing out of the double team is not his strongest thing he does, but even if Ben Simmons does make a couple threes, teams are still going to dare him all day long.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a long time until he's viewed like instinctually where players on the other team are like, oh, this is someone that we're going to have to get out on. But, him moving to the fourth spot, I think some of it, obviously in today's NBA, a lot of people like to say it's positionless. And, positions, obviously aren't as important as they once were. And although it will be a change, I don't think it's going to be maybe quite as radical of a change as a lot of people expect. We're still going to see, the Sixers are still going to emphasize getting out in transition, and that's, Ben at his best. If he gets a defensive rebound or someone else gets a defensive rebound and gives it to him in the backcourt, he's going to be pushing the ball like he always does. And then also I think you're going to see him in a lot of action at the top of the key still, whether that's, in dribble handoffs or pick and rolls. I think Brett's going to find ways where he can still utilize Ben, and I think that means while there will be situations where maybe Shake's running a pick and roll with another player and Ben's posted in the corner, I don't think he's going to be a guy that's used consistently as, too often as a floor spacer. I think, the ball is still going to be in his hands a lot, especially in transition, and he's still going to be, heavily involved on the action. I think the main thing will be, in certain times in half-court sets, especially in postseason play, just having a guy with the ball in his hands, like in Shake it in the point guard spot that can, defenses have to respect at the top of the key. I think that's going to be the main difference, but it's not like the ball, it's not like Ben's still not going to have the ball in his hands a lot of the time that he's on the floor, because I think he still will.
Michael, I'm really glad you brought that up, because when I spoke with Ben Golliver earlier this week, because he's down there in the bubble, and he said his big concern with Ben, his new position, is he doesn't want Brett just taking the ball, matter-of-factly out of his hands, because Ben Golliver feels like that Ben Simmons is one of the best ball handlers and decision makers with the ball in his hand in the open court. So it seems like from what you're saying that it's not that the ball is being taken out of his hands, is that some of the pressure is taken off of him to be the main catalyst of the offense.
Absolutely, Josh. And it'll be situational. Like he won't be forced in the situations where they're taking the ball out at half court and the defense is already set. It's not necessarily going to have to dump it into Ben and they're going to be able to stand 10 feet back from him. In those situations, that's when, Shake is going to be the guy that has the ball, and they'll put Ben in pick and roll situations or dribble handoff situations or other situations. But this was always technically supposed to be the plan. Like I tweeted earlier this week that Shake Milton could be what Markelle Fultz was supposed to be for the Sixers. And I didn't necessarily mean that he could have the same ceiling. I meant that, when they drafted Markelle, they drafted him specifically to fit next to Ben as a combo guard that could both, create the offense on his own and handle the ball and take some of that pressure off of Ben, and then also play off of the ball and spot up and catch and shoot when Ben had the ball. And that's basically the role Shake's going to play. So I think, some of it is a little bit overblown because it's so, it's so jarring to hear Brett Brown say, I've moved Ben off the ball, during all these practices. And it's certainly going to be different. But, Brett's a smart enough guy to realize how dangerous and how good Ben is with the ball in, 80% of game situations, especially in transition when, he's sprinting down the court. He's one of the fastest guys in the league. And with, one of the best handles in the league, like Ben said, Ben Golliver that you referenced. So, I think that, obviously it'll be a different situation, but it's, Brett knows how dangerous Ben can be in those situations, and he's going to look to still maximize that skill set.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline on 97.3 ESPN. NBA writer for CBS Sports, also Sixers insider. Follow him on Twitter at @TheRealMikeKB. Mike, you mentioned Shake Milton, so did Hunter. So I want to touch on Shake because one of the things that's interesting to me about this whole situation is everyone overlooks something about the league. The league is built around teams that have multiple ball handlers. There's not a successful team in this league over the last decade and change that has had a successful playoff run without multiple ball handlers. So to me, everyone wants to talk about Ben Simmons, but I'm going to flip it in the other direction. I think Shake might be one of the most important X factors for this entire playoff run.
Absolutely, Josh. And it's funny enough that you use that terminology because I actually asked Shake specifically during a Zoom call last week. I said point blank, I was like, Shake, do you think you can be an X factor for this team? And he kind of pushed back on that term specifically. But the point stands nonetheless, especially when you consider the fact that, the book is out on most of the other Sixers at this point, meaning that, obviously Tobias Harris is a veteran that's been around. Al Horford's a veteran that's been around. People know what to expect when you go up against Joel at this point in his career. Same with Ben. Shake is a guy that started, played in less than 20 NBA games. Half the teams in the league haven't even faced him yet. There's not a whole lot of tape for the teams other than those games that he was playing in right before the season was suspended. So, he's still kind of a question mark, I think, to a lot of teams in the league, as much as you can be in 2020, given all the, the technology and film that's around. And then given that, I think he's a guy that can maybe not catch guys by surprise, but just come in and when there's so much attention given to Ben and Joel and the other guys, Tobias on the team, he's a guy that can come in and really, like you said, kind of be that X factor that maybe he's not going to score 30 because the other guys are doing it, but he's the guy that can make the plays, knock down a few shots like that they didn't have before, make a couple assists and things like that can turn the tide of the game.
How dominant could Ben Simmons be as a roller?
Yeah, that's a good point, Brody, and I think that has a lot. That's a big factor in Brett's decision here because in the the small amounts that we've seen Ben in that role, he's really good at it. In a couple ways, he's really good at finishing around the rim, and he's also really good at in the role that something like the Warriors would do a lot with Draymond Green and Steph when they would have Draymond as the roller, but he wouldn't necessarily look to finish. He would sometimes roll and then catch it and then pass out, make like a skip pass to the perimeter to find another guy. And Ben, obviously, with his playmaking and vision and passing skills that he has, is excellent in both of those scenarios. He can, catch oops or finish around the rim or be, kind of the intermediary, secondary passer. And I think it's going to open, a lot of different possibilities for the Sixers offense that they really weren't, they were one of the least teams that least utilized pick and rolls during the past couple seasons. And Brett told us the other day on a Zoom call that, the emergence of Shake and Ben as then a roller has, allowed them to kind of include more pick and rolls into the playbook and expand things a little bit more. So I think it's going to be obviously interesting to see, but I think we'll see some more wrinkles offensively with Ben as a roller that they weren't really using before Orlando.
Now, Al Horford's interesting. Joel Embiid, they're looking to get 38 minutes out of him. So how many minutes do you think that Al Horford can get?
I think they'll probably be looking to get like a good mid-20s a game out of Al. Like you said, it's Joel. I mean, Joel's playing 38 is obviously, best case scenario, high end. I think realistically, when he can, Brett's obviously going to try not to, get that much. Let's say Joel gets around 34 a game. That's, 14 minutes that Al will be out there solo manning the post, the center spot. And there'll be, certainly some overlap in different lineups that Brett will try out. So I think mainly, the most important thing, obviously, is going to be those minutes that he's out there without Joel. And I think, if you want him at his best for those in terms of, energy and everything like that. So you want to maximize those minutes. And then the rest of the time that he's out there, there's still no answer in terms of how well he's going to play next to Joel. Hopefully they'll figure out a little bit more cohesion than they had during, the regular season. But other than Shake, I think Al is probably the biggest, use the word again, X factor on the Sixers, just in terms of if he is able to kind of find a stride and find a role that works well for him, he could really take that team to another level. But, it could go the other way too, where if he kind of still is struggling to fit in and things are clunky with him, it could end up being trouble for the team.
You mentioned about Al Horford and how the X factor he can be. I think that it's a combination of Horford, at least for me, the combination of Horford with the bench, though, because if Horford is the quote-unquote backup center and he's coming in a roll off the bench. He's obviously part of a group of players that Brett is going to work in. And to me, I think that you got to look around the Eastern Conference and say that, whether it's Horford, whether it's Furkan, whether it's, Matisse Thybulle, any of those guys, there are certain teams that the Sixers are going to need those guys to match up with in the Eastern Conference as those guys come in and play minutes for Ben and Joel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Depth, for the Sixers is going to be huge, and I think we'll see that especially during this first 8 seeding games. I think we're going to see a lot of tinkering on Brett's part in terms of, trying to figure out the rotation behind the starting 5 and who, which units work well together, obviously outside of the first 5. I think those first 8 games would be really important to that because, obviously once you get into that postseason play, the rotation shrinks a little bit. And some of the guys, Alec Burks, Glenn Robinson didn't really get a whole lot of opportunity to get acclimated to the Sixers system, before the season was suspended. So I think it'll be, really interesting to see what groups Brett thinks work well together. He mentioned yesterday on the phone specifically that he was running a lot of Horford and Ben together with Cork Boss, Matisse Thybulle, and Tobias Harris, which I thought was an interesting lineup combination. But I think we'll see a lot of things like that up until the playoffs start, where at that point you'll probably see, the rotation slim down to 9 or maybe 10 guys.
Now, you just got me excited because you mentioned that Brett brought up Matisse Thybulle as a potential lineup. I love the idea of Thybulle in this postseason because you look at the team the Sixers got to match up with. The Bucks got Chris Middleton. The Celtics got guys like Gordon Hayward and Jaylen Brown. You have a team like Miami with all of their perimeter players along with Jimmy Butler, guys like Nunn and Robinson and Dragic coming off the bench. And I think Thybulle might be the key to really slowing down the perimeter threats in these playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely, Josh. And I think Brett thinks that too. I definitely think that he sees Matisse playing a pretty important role for this team. And I think in a way the break might have benefited Matisse too, because obviously he's still a rookie, but I think in a way it probably feels almost like his rookie season ended in March, almost like they didn't make the playoffs, and now they're kind of coming back again to a second season. I think, maybe some of the jitters or things. Obviously you can't prepare for postseason basketball. That'll be a little bit different. But I think the poise, and the preparation might just be a little bit higher than what it was for him during the season. And if he can, for him, the question really has been on the offensive end in terms of if he's able to stay out on the floor, because, he obviously defensively is one of the better perimeter players on the team. I think for him, if he can just get out in transition and run and then knock down those threes, also like Ben in transition that he was asked to do during the regular season. If he can do that at a decent clip, I think we could see him playing, a really big role for the Sixers throughout the postseason for sure.
Sticking with the bench, do you think that Cork Boss can hold his own defensively in half-court sets?
That's tough. I would say yes in certain situations. Obviously it's not ideal, and I think Brett will have a pretty quick leash for him in those situations, meaning that, if he's out there and he's getting torched pretty badly, he's not going to, leave him out there for too long. But I think, if not himself, the Sixers as a team obviously have a lot of good defenders, and I think the hope is that, what he brings on the offensive end, which obviously is floor spacing, something that they need, with Ben and Joel to give them that extra space that, some of the other guys, whether it be Al or Joel or Ben, can kind of make up for, what he doesn't bring on the defensive end in terms of team defense, whether he gets beat or if they can switch quick enough, things like that. But, just like, Matisse's biggest question in terms of how much he was going to be able to play depends on his offensive output. The same could be said about Furkan defensively. If he's able to, I do think he showed some progress throughout the season. He got quicker with his hands. I think laterally he got a little bit quicker and better at staying in front of people. Obviously, he's still, you're not going to put him on Kawhi Leonard in Game 7 to win the game for you. But I think, if he can just do enough to make it decent where they can help him out, then he should be able to, get some serious time for himself out there.
Michael Kaskey-Blomain joining us here on the Boardwalk on the hotline on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at The Real Mike KB, CBS Sports NBA writer and Sixers insider. Mike, you guys were just talking about Furkan, and Furkan is a topic I'm very conflicted on this because on one hand, I understand how important floor spacing is when you have guys like Ben and Joel on your team. But at the same time, I look around the Eastern Conference and I wonder, because how good this defensively the Sixers team can be, what's really more important when you're going against the Bucks, the Celtics, or the Heat, or the Raptors? Is it your defense, or is it spreading the floor? So I ask you that question. What is going to be more important to beat those teams? Is it how you space the floor around Ben and Joel, or is it the kind of defense you play against those teams that present unique matchups?
I mean, obviously, it's a combination of both, Josh, and I do think that's part of the reason that they brought those guys in from Golden State because, ideally, as good as Cork Boss is as a floor spacer, he's still pretty one-dimensional. He's gotten a little bit better putting the ball on the floor. But I think ideally Brett wants, would like a little bit more of a two-way player that, like you said, obviously, that can do both of those things. So you don't necessarily have to sacrifice one for the other in a series against the likes of the Bucks or the Raptors. And I think, that's why ultimately if Glenn Robinson or Alec Burks or Matisse, I think they'll have a slightly better chance than Furkan to, really kind of carve out a role for themselves in that playoff rotation just because of their ability, to get it done on both ends of the floor, where Cork Boss might be a little bit better of a shooter than any of those guys on that end. What he gives up on the other end might not, balance out. So I think, ultimately, I think it might be a little bit more important to have the spacing around those guys offensively because no matter what, if you have Ben and Joel and then a couple other solid guys out there like Josh and Matisse, you're gonna have a good defensive team and they're gonna get stops. I think the Sixers, especially down the stretch in like playoff series the past couple of years, they've faltered more on the offensive end. They, had long droughts of time where they can't score, and that's where, Ben's difficulties with spacing the floor really gets magnified, and where Joel has kind of struggled with, taking care of the ball or handling double teams and things like that. So I think they're a little bit ahead defensively at this point of where they are. So I think, if you had to pick one, I would say a little bit more toward the offense, and that's why I think Furkan will get a chance. But ultimately, I wouldn't be shocked if one of those guys, that's a little bit more of a two-way player, edged him out in the rotation.
All right, Josh and I were having some fun today with this conversation, so I want to get your opinion on it. Do you think Larry Bird would dominate in 2020?
Yeah, I do. I mean, dominate in terms of would he be the best player in the league? Probably not.
No.
Would he be an all-star level player?
No. Here's the deal, Mike. So the topic came up out of nowhere about older players playing in the modern league, and my point is that to me, Larry in today's game is a better version of Dirk. Dirk won a league MVP. I think Larry's got a higher basketball IQ. I think that Dirk is not the most athletic dude in the world. I think Bird would be a better version of Dirk. And I think that, if Dirk was able to win a league MVP and have a long career, then Larry with modern medicine would have just as long as a career, whereas Hunter and Darryl Reynolds extremely disagree with me.
Yeah, I said maybe a little Spencer Hawes.
Spencer Hawes. Wow.
I'm kidding. I'm definitely kidding.
That's a little disrespectful right there. No, I agree. I don't think Larry Bird would be the best player in the league by any means, but I do think that he would be, a guy, an all-star, potentially MVP level player. I think at this point, Larry Bird almost gets a little bit underrated because people tend to lump him in terms of being a guy from the 80s that might not have been, the most athletic or anything like that. But he did a lot on the court in terms of, obviously, but he was a great passer. He could get out in transition, good rebounder, obviously probably the first really prolific three-point shooter. So he has a type of game that would translate well to today, given the fact that he could space the floor and also get to the rim. And then Josh, like you said, with, a big problem with Larry was his back starting to break down, early into his career comparatively to guys that play today. And you would think that, he probably wouldn't have built that fence for his mom or that brick wall or whatever he did in the 80s that blew his back out under to the supervision in today's NBA, and he'd be able to stretch his career out a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, I still think he would still be Larry Bird today.
That's what I was saying. In today's world, Larry Bird isn't paving his mother's driveway for her. He's paying someone else to do it.
Right. Yeah. I definitely don't think the Celtics would let him, go blow his back out doing something like that in the offseason.
All right, Mike, really quick. So let's try to find some consensus here. Name a player from the 80s or 90s who was a star that you look at then and say, that dude couldn't survive in today's game. Like some star level player then.
A star from the 80s that couldn't survive in the game today?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's tough. I don't know, man. You put me on the spot. I can't think of any that can't survive. I mean, obviously there would be some that, whose game wouldn't translate as well. But I feel like if you were able to be a star in the 80s at this point, that, you would still be able to have some moderate success, at least in the game today.
All right, I'll just be controversial and just ruin the conversation for everybody. I don't think Mo Cheeks is a starting point guard in today's NBA. I know Sixer fans love him, but the dude, literally the only thing he did was dribble, pass, and play defense. He couldn't score a lick. Yeah,
that's a fair consensus. I guess in that vein, it'd be tough to. It's just always tough to compare players across eras.
Broads, you agree? Disagree?
I get what you're saying, but maybe he's worse than Spencer Hawes. I don't know.
On that note, he's Michael Kaskey-Blomain. Follow him on Twitter @TheRealMikeKB. CBS Sports NBA writer, also Sixers insider. Follow him for all your Sixers and NBA news. As all guests, he appeared on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, appreciate the time on this Friday.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Good talking to you.
Sports Bash here on 97.3 ESPN. He's Hunter Brody. I'm Josh Nick. I had to pull out a name to at least tear down somebody. We're talking too much. I'm giving Bird too much credit. I had to throw somebody under the bus, Hunter.
I would have to agree with you. You're giving him way too much credit.
Sports Bash being brought to you by Matt Black Kia. Matt Black Kia wants to get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Bike in Egg Harbor Township. We'll go back to the text board next, 609-403-0973. Happy Hour Friday. Man, we've touched on so many things today. We still have another half hour to go on the Sports Bash. 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig, Hunter Brody, hanging out with you.
The Flyers are in the NHL playoffs, and when the NHL returns to the ice, you can listen to all the Flyers playoff hockey action.
He scores!
On 97.3 ESPN with Tim Saunders and Steve Coates.
Now teed up into the high slot, and Hedman was stopped by Carter Hart.
Listen to all the exciting Flyers play-by-play action. It's Philadelphia Flyers playoff hockey right here on 97.3 ESPN.
Happy birthday to you.
You didn't think we'd forget your birthday, did you?
Wow. I'm overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed? It's just another year.
For you, maybe, but I've only got a few more years to retirement.
Don't let retirement planning overwhelm you. Contact the SHM Financial Group. Since 1958, the SHM Financial Group has worked closely with their clients to assess their risk profile. Are you quickly approaching or in retirement? An annuity might be right for a portion of your plan. Annuities are not for everyone, but if you're looking for safety, security, preservation of principal, low to no fees, and an income you can't outlive, contact SHM.